The laughter hit him before the glass doors even closed, light and careless. The kind that barely noticed it was cutting into someone else's skin. The old man in worn work boots stood still for a second in the marble lobby, his shoulders squared but his eyes tired, as if he'd learned long ago that reacting only fed the noise. Somewhere inside that moment, a quiet question lingered, one that brushed against the reader's own heart without asking permission. What if this were you, stepping into a place where you clearly did not belong, or at least where others had decided you did not? Would you turn back, or would you keep walking anyway? His name was Walter Hayes, and the boots had once been brown leather, though years of concrete dust and rain had turned them a dull, stubborn gray. He wore a denim jacket faded at the elbows, a plain shirt beneath it, and jeans that carried the shape of years spent kneeling, lifting, fixing things no one else wanted to touch. He did not look like the kind of man who belonged in the headquarters of a fast-growing tech firm in downtown Chicago, where polished shoes and tailored suits moved like a school of fish, sleek and identical. Yet here he was, holding a manila folder close to his chest, as if it contained something fragile, something that could be lost if he loosened his grip. People glanced at him, then away, then back again with smirks that bloomed quickly and died just as fast. A group of young executives gathered near the elevator laughed louder than necessary, eyes flicking toward his boots and back to each other, the joke unspoken but shared. Walter felt the heat rise in his neck, a familiar sensation, like the echo of old job sites where he had been dismissed before he could even explain himself. He thought of his late wife, Margaret, who used to say that dignity was not something others could give or take, only something you chose to carry. He carried it now even as the floor beneath him seemed to tilt. He had not always been invisible. Decades earlier, Walter had been a skilled machinist in Ohio, the kind who could listen to a motor and hear what it needed. He worked hard, saved carefully, and dreamed modestly. Then came the layoffs, the factory closures, the slow unraveling of a life that had once felt solid. Margaret fell ill not long after, and medical bills swallowed what little safety they had built. Walter took whatever work he could find, construction, repairs, janitorial shifts at night, always honest, always quiet. When Margaret passed, the house felt too big and the future too small. He moved, downsized, kept going because stopping felt like disappearing entirely. What no one in that lobby knew was that Walter had never stopped paying attention. During night shifts cleaning offices, he read discarded reports and trade magazines left behind. He listened to conversations through half-open doors, learned how companies rose and fell, how ideas were valued, how arrogance often masked fragile foundations. Years earlier, he had invested a small inheritance Margaret had left him. Not in flashy stocks, but in a struggling startup whose product he believed in. He believed because it solved a real problem, because it reminded him of the kind of practical ingenuity he had once lived by. That startup was now the company whose lobby echoed with laughter. A receptionist finally noticed him, her smile tight and polite, asking if he was lost. Walter shook his head and said he was expected, his voice steady though his hands trembled slightly. He was directed to a conference room, the glass walls offering no privacy, every step toward it another chance for someone to look him over and dismiss him. Inside, he sat alone at a long table, the city stretching beyond the windows, feeling the weight of years pressed gently but firmly against his chest. He thought of the choices that had led him here, each one small, each one necessary. If you were in his place, would you have had the patience to wait, the faith to keep believing in something no one else could see yet? The executives entered in a rush, energy high, laughter trailing behind them like perfume. They barely acknowledged Walter at first, assuming he was a contractor or a messenger who had wandered into the wrong room. When they finally realized he was the one they were meant to meet, confusion flickered across their faces, followed by something closer to amusement. Walter felt it all and said nothing. He opened his folder slowly, deliberately, as if giving them time to catch up to reality. What followed was not dramatic in the way movies make it seem. There were no raised voices, no slammed fists. There was only the quiet presentation of documents, signatures, numbers that told a story far larger than any of them had imagined. Walter owned the majority stake. He had believed early, invested patiently, and never sold. The room changed, the air thickening as laughter drained away and was replaced by disbelief, then discomfort, then something like respect, though it arrived too late to erase what had already been shown. Yet the most surprising change was not in them, but in Walter. He did not relish their embarrassment. He did not enjoy watching confidence crumble. Instead, he felt a strange sadness, a recognition of how easily people forgot to see one another. He thought of the times he had been laughed at, passed over, spoken around as if he were furniture. He thought of how close he had come to bitterness, how easy it would have been to let that bitterness define him. Instead, he chose something else. Over the following weeks, Walter became a quiet presence in the company. He kept his boots, though he polished them now, not to impress but out of simple care. He listened more than he spoke. He asked about people's families, their hopes, their fears. He noticed the janitorial staff, the interns, the security guards, learning names and stories, remembering birthdays. When layoffs were discussed, he asked hard questions about alternatives, about shared sacrifice, about responsibility. The company began to change, slowly, like a ship adjusting course, not with a sharp turn but with steady intention. One afternoon, Walter invited a group of local high school students to tour the building, kids from neighborhoods that reminded him of where he'd come from. They walked the halls wide-eyed, dreaming dreams they hadn't known were allowed. Walter spoke to them gently about patience, about learning, about faith that didn't demand immediate reward. He made sure they were treated kindly, safely, with respect, understanding how easily a careless word could close a door forever. Watching them, he felt Margaret's presence, a quiet approval that warmed him more than any financial victory ever could. The executives who had laughed learned, in their own ways. Some apologized, awkwardly but sincerely. Others simply watched and absorbed the lesson, humbled by a man who wielded power without cruelty. Walter accepted what was offered and let the rest go. He knew that change was not about punishment, but about example. Dignity, once chosen, had a way of spreading. As the months passed, the story of the old man in work boots became something of a legend, though Walter never encouraged it. He preferred to be known not for what he owned, but for how he treated people. In quieter moments he wondered how many chances he himself had been given, how many hands had helped him along the way without asking for credit. Gratitude, he realized, was a form of strength. Before the story ends, take a moment and ask yourself what you might have seen if you'd been in that lobby, and whether you would have laughed, looked away, or chosen kindness instead. If this story stirred something in you, share your thoughts in the comments below. And if it truly touched your heart, consider liking, commenting, sharing, and subscribing so stories of compassion and quiet courage can continue to be told.